Hello once again from the Prim Reaper. This video will be about something I've wanted to talk about for a long time. I was intending to do a video about it probably after I'd completed my Feminist Issues series, and potentially even after my eventual Misuse of Words series, but I've been seeing so much of this lately that I've been prompted to move it to the front of the line. So what am I referring to here? I'm talking about what I often see referred to as the manosphere, though I kind of dislike that term because I strongly suspect that it contributes to the problem that I'll be talking about today. That is the way people conflate the different men's groups together under the broad umbrella term MRAs or men's rights activists. This conflation leads to a lot of unnecessary misunderstandings and confusion over what actual men's rights advocates believe. Now, many of these instances of conflation are so egregious that it leads me to believe that some of them are deliberate and malicious, or are at least cases of persistent willful ignorance. However, for cases where the ignorance is more benign and simply born out of a lack of experience with these groups, rather than a refusal to try to understand, this video is intended to be a brief educational lesson in the differences between the groups from a more objective perspective than what is often found coming from the mainstream media. Before I begin, I'd just like to clarify that although I consider myself an egalitarian and an advocate for equal rights, I'm a strong sympathizer to men's issues, as I see they're often dismissed or treated as less serious than women's issues in society. I regularly participate in men's rights groups and discussions and have worked hard to familiarize myself with the differences between these groups and the other groups I'll be talking about today. My goal here is not to romanticize nor demonize anyone in this discussion. Rather, my intention is just to talk strictly about the differences between the groups and their stated goals. I'm not claiming to be an expert, I'm just trying to be as objective as possible. Also, because I'm not an expert, if I get anything wrong, or even if there's just anything anyone would like to add, please feel free to do so in the comments. As always, I love the discussion with you guys. Anyway, on with the show. Now, feminism has different groups under the main label, like equity feminists, radical feminists, liberal feminists, etc. These groups may focus on certain different elements within feminism, but most, if not all of them, operate under the idea that there is a patriarchy in some form, and that this is standing in the way of true equality. The different men's groups, on the other hand, generally do not fall under a single unifying framework in the same way that different feminist groups do, except perhaps for their united dislike of feminism. Furthermore, many of the groups in the manosphere aren't even particularly concerned with rights at all, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. The first group I'll be talking about is, naturally, the men's rights movement. There are several different names that people in this group go by: MRAs, men's rights activists, men's rights advocates, or the MRM. If I'm not mistaken, I think that some of these names have fallen out of favor and are used less frequently these days, but I do believe that the men's rights movement is the generally accepted label. Folks in this group focus on exactly what the label states. These people see the inequalities that men face in our society: legal infant circumcision, uneven divorce and custody rights, unequal sentences for the same crime compared with women, lower services for men suffering from domestic violence or homelessness, to name a few, and seek to highlight and fight against these inequalities. Most of these people have absolutely nothing against women and certainly do not want to take away women's rights. In fact, any women bashing or legitimate misogyny is quickly downvoted and heavily criticized by other members of the subreddit. A lot of the posts that may be taken by some as misogyny are usually just criticisms levied at feminism or the gynocentrism present in many Western cultures. Gynocentrism, for those who are unaware, refers to the tendency of those in Western societies to give more weight to women's concerns and issues, and the increased likelihood of support for women's causes. Under gynocentrism, women are seen as having inherent worth, whereas men are more often seen as disposable. It's not unreasonable to me that people might be a little uncomfortable holding that second distinction and may desire to change it. Despite this, alternate views are welcomed into the men's rights subreddit, and the participants are generally more than happy to engage people in conversation who are legitimately looking for information or seeking to see what all the fuss is about. I've seen several threads in the men's rights subreddit from people saying things like, "I heard so many terrible things about the men's rights movement, but then I came here and was surprised at how reasonable it was." Unfortunately, this is often not the case with the feminist subreddit, where people even hinting at the fact that they disagree with the feminist viewpoint are quickly banned for their insubordination. Anyway, most in the men's rights movement do not deny that women have some legitimate issues as well. However, their primary concern is to seek equality to the rights and benefits that many women have in the Western world. Though I have always strongly considered the feminist definition of equality to be dubious, it's pertinent here in comparison that if feminists seek equality but focus on women, men's rights advocates seek equality but focus on men. One major difference, though, is that I don't see men's rights advocates lining up around feminist gatherings and shouting chants at them to make them go away. I'm just saying, one group might be a little more honest about equality than the other. Just putting that out there. I mean, you can't really be sure, but you never know, right? Oh, and I'm just going to give a brief mention to the term Meninism here. Meninism is not the opposite of feminism, and it is not an interchangeable name to the men's rights movement. As far as I'm aware, the origin of Meninism is satirical in nature. Of all the labels on this list, this one probably gave me the most trouble to properly research, because most of the articles about it are not giving an objective account of the label's history. Surprise, surprise. So if I'm mistaken about any of this, please do feel free to correct me. But what I recall about it is that it began with a satirical Twitter account simply seeking to flip the sexes on feminist claims to demonstrate the sexism within. Though I recall small groups of people humorously proselytizing about it on college campuses, not quite sure which came first. It was never intended as a serious group, and yet tons of people lost their minds about it, talking about how misogynist it was. So, point proven, I guess? Sure, the joke went right over their heads, but that doesn't mean we can't all laugh about it. The strange thing is, the label has seemed to really take off and spread. There's all kinds of merchandise featuring the Meninist hashtag, and it's entirely possible that some people are talking about it unironically now. Possibly due to the confusion over the conflation of men's groups, like I've been saying. Whatever the case, I encourage you to try to Google this term just to see the sheer levels of butthurt about it. It's actually a sight to behold. Another group is Men Going Their Own Way, or MGTOWs, and they are a group of men that view the current social, romantic, and sexual landscape between men and women as far too dangerous to be worth navigating, and seek to take a different path free from relationships with women. These people put their effort into improving their own lives, focusing on their own personal goals and wealth. I have seen a spectrum of MGTOWs, some of them supportive of men's rights groups and aims, and others indifferent. But once again, these are definitely separate groups with different goals. Pickup artists, or PUAs, are not focused on men's rights. In fact, a lot of them view men's rights activists in an unfavorable light. For example, one of the most well-known PUA sites, Return of Kings, has a few articles critiquing the men's rights movement, like 5 Reasons I Am Not a Men's Rights Activist, or The Men's Rights Movement is No Place for Men. Of course, not all PUAs are equally unsympathetic to the movement, but just reading some segments from these articles leads me to believe that some of these folks are just as ignorant of the men's rights movement as feminists are. Lines like, "The premier goal of MRA is to annihilate these notions that men should be masculine and women should be feminine," are what I'm referring to. Generally, PUAs are more concerned about acquiring sex than they are with men's issues. They often discuss strategies for how to approach and attract women, generally referred to as game. There's no question that some of these strategies are more innocuous than others, such as the suggestions to build confidence or to increase one's value through working out or cultivating attractive hobbies. But there are certainly articles that can generally be seen as, well, heading into questionable territory by most people's standards. Many PUAs express disdain for feminism and the way that it has influenced Western women. That is, they are no longer subservient or chaste and therefore make poor wives, while many of them see this as license to get more commitment-free sex. Either way, most articles in these circles seem dedicated to advice for helping men navigate the current social landscape in such a way that will improve their chances of getting laid. I feel the need to stress here because some folks seem to have trouble with this concept, but when I mention that PUAs are focused on getting laid, they're not approaching this from a position of seeking rights. In fact, I'm pretty sure nobody, at least nobody that's actually taken seriously, is saying that it should be men's right to have sex with whoever they desire. PUAs are not a rights group, they're a gettin' dat ass group. When a PUA says, "Swiggity swooty, I'm coming for that booty," he's not trying to have it enshrined in law. This is a very common and pervasive claim when feminists talk about men's rights groups, that men are trying to gain the right to get free access to sex, or even worse, to legalize rape. It's just so far from the truth that it makes my head spin. The men's rights movement is focused on legal or moral rights and social equalities. PUAs are not focused on rights. PUAs are not MRAs, period. Now, the last group I'll be talking about is the Red Pill group, which may seem a little redundant, but I see this group getting conflated with the MRM probably most of all. The Red Pill is a group on Reddit that contains elements of all these groups. I would say that they are most closely aligned with the PUAs, but they do have different headings under which they discuss men's rights issues and MGTOW topics. In fact, as you can see from the flare listing on their sidebar, the Red Pill subreddit talks about many different topics, such as fitness, finance, and married life, naturally from the Red Pill perspective. That perspective generally circles around the supposed inherent natures of men and women, with a nod to evolutionary psychology, and focuses on building awareness of these natures and utilizing them in an underlying framework of sexual strategy. The Red Pill subreddit holds a lot of what many people would consider controversial views, and it seems that these views are often grouped in with the men's rights movement and used to discredit them and their goals. These topics can be difficult to summarize in a video like this. It would probably take me an entire separate video to go over the Red Pill's theoretical framework in its entirety. But for our purposes here, I will say that they make a lot of very broad, sweeping generalizations with regards to men and women's nature and apply these simplifications often in their discussions about sexual strategy. My personal opinions about these different groups aside for now, it is all too common for people to assume these groups all fall under the same category of men's rights, despite the massive difference in scope and beliefs between them. The part that probably bothers me the most, though, is that it's really not that difficult to spend some time looking at the material produced by these separate groups and see that they are indeed pushing for different things. This is why I strongly question at this point whether people who are guilty of this conflation are simply ignorant or are doing this deliberately. In my next video, I'll showcase some particularly bad examples of what I've been talking about here that have come up recently. For now, I'll end this video with an analogy. The different groups within the manosphere are related in the same way that milk and sour cream are related. Sure, they're both technically dairy, but if you try to use them interchangeably on cereal, you're gonna have a bad time. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next one.